is Inside the FLX. I'm your host, Josh Durso, and today we're talking to Lou Gard. He is the Geneva City Supervisor, and he's here to give us a little insight into what's going on in his city, talk about his campaign, and some of the other stuff that's been going on. Lou, thanks a lot for coming in today.
Sure. Thank you, Josh. Thanks for having me. I guess first, I just want to thank you for everything you do here to make sure that folks in the Finger Lakes get access to their public officials, access to information. I know Finger Lakes One and Finger Lakes One TV are valued news sources, so thanks for everything you do.
So, a little bit about yourself. Give us some of your background and maybe what kind of got this spark going for public service.
Sure, yeah. So for me, this is really about home. And by that I mean Geneva and the Finger Lakes. I grew up in Geneva and went to Geneva High School. Met my wife there. We both grew up in Geneva, high school sweethearts, and family had been there for a long time, and we're both lucky enough to be living and working in Geneva, and I think we're thinking very much about the future of Geneva and making it a better place. So that's really where this started. I was lucky enough to grow up in a house where both of my parents were public servants. My father was a sheriff's deputy for over 30 years, and my mother worked in the court system. And so we grew up in the kind of house where, the dinner table conversation at night was what's going on in schools or what's going on at City Hall or what's going on down the street. So that really taught me, I think they taught me that sort of the privilege of living in a place like Geneva comes with the responsibility that you have to give back to that place and make it a better place. So that's sort of my intrinsic motivation. I think from a public policy standpoint, I'm really proud of what Geneva is today. I'm really proud of where it's going, proud of the momentum, and I just think that Geneva needs a really strong, powerful voice on the Board of Supervisors that's going to continue to advocate for Geneva's interests and help move it forward. Mm-hmm. So that's...
Now, obviously you've been doing this for a little bit now. What have you learned in your short time as city supervisor?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really complex job, I would say. It's kind of remarkable, all the things that the county does and everything that county government touches. You really have to, there's a learning curve. It takes a lot of time to really learn this stuff to serve as effectively as possible. So I'm really grateful that I've had this 3 or 4 month sort of launch into doing this job. I think a big takeaway is that you have to be able to build relationships to help get things done. It's not the sort of place where you can just get elected and then run in there and sort of barnstorm the place and pound on your chest and pound on the tables and demand that things happen, because you're one of, a pretty large number of people, and you need to work with those people toward the best common interest of your constituents.
Now, what are some of those, I would assume there were priorities. When you set out to do something like this, you have that vision of what you want to do or what you want to accomplish. What were some of those priorities when you took this on?
Yeah, so, I mean, definitely the priority of making sure that, like I said a little bit earlier, just making sure that Geneva is recognized, is acknowledged, is appreciated at the county level. I think we've had so many wins in Geneva thanks to some of the city government leadership, other county supervisors, other constituency groups in Geneva that really work toward the common good there, the school district, the colleges. Making sure that at the county level we are appreciated for those wins, and then stuff like tourism and the wine industry. I mean, the food and beverage industry in Geneva it's just a fun place to be. I tell people that when I was in graduate school, my wife and I were always, have you ever heard the term FOMO, fear of missing out?
Yep.
I mean, we would be looking on Facebook or something, Instagram or something, and you see a new restaurant pop up in Geneva, and you say, "Oh man, I wish I was there." I had total FOMO. So there was a lot of that going on. But I think that momentum really needs to get acknowledged at the county level. So there's that part. But then there's more brass tacks stuff. I mean, the landfill is a tremendous issue for me. When we first bought our house, I walked out on the back porch and I could smell it. And so that's obviously an issue. I mean, making sure that that thing doesn't expand, making sure that that thing doesn't leak, making sure that however it's closed up, it's done soon and it's done in a responsible way that keeps people safe and keeps our water system safe. Then there's the issue of economic development and taxes. I mean, I sort of marry the two together. I think the county's done a very good job at sustainably managing their budget. It's a pretty responsible entity in that regard, I think. Making sure that it stays that way is another thing. So on the economic development side, it's continuing to look for opportunities that will create jobs for folks, that will increase incomes and really lift all boats.
So speaking of that landfill issue that you discussed, obviously that's not just a discussion that's happening in Ontario County, but it's one that seems to be taking place throughout the whole region. On that front, what do you sort of see as being the tidal action that's taking place? It seems like everyone is sort of rallying around the idea of we need to protect what we have. We need to protect our lakes. We need to protect the environment. Is that kind of the direction you see all of this going, this larger discussion?
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. I mean, people are proud of where they live, and I think people know when they're being threatened. And I think people feel that the landfills and things like the landfills really do constitute a threat to our way of life. I had the privilege of attending one of the DEC hearings in Seneca Falls to hear some of the Seneca Falls residents' concerns about, and Waterloo residents and others' concerns about the landfill in Seneca County. And it's just amazing to see those people who, you know, they're not the type of folks that I would normally associate with being citizen activists, but they're out there and they're talking about how they can't eat the tomatoes that are growing in their garden because they can't get out there and work in the garden because it smells so bad around their house. I mean, that's a real issue. That's not people don't make this stuff up and then decide they're going to show up on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock in a high school auditorium to talk about it. So, you know, yeah.
Now, on that front, obviously you have one side where this seemingly larger negative is looming, but at the same time, a lot of good stuff. You mentioned the wine and craft brew industry. What's it like from your perspective, now that you're back in Geneva, and now a public official, to actually be experiencing that and living that on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's a real privilege. I mean, I'm proud of Geneva, you know, and I'm proud of the Finger Lakes. I mean, it's not just Geneva. It's, you know, great stuff going on in Waterloo. You've got that awesome breakfast place there and stands and all that sort of stuff. And Canandaigua's got it coming in too, and it's all around the lakes. It's really a pride point, I think. I love telling, you know, former classmates either from college or law school or wherever just about all the great stuff that's happening here, and people come and visit us. I mean, in the summertime, our spare bedroom is full every other weekend.
Right.
You know, so it's really rewarding to see just how vibrant Geneva and the Finger Lakes are becoming.
Now, in the city of Geneva, or covering Geneva as a whole, we'll say, what are some of those big challenges that you kind of see that are necessary to combat and to work directly against in the coming years?
So, yeah, I mean, the challenges, we've really already sort of talked about the landfill. I mean, the landfill's a challenge, right? Because I don't think you can look at tourism or the food industry or the wine industry without also looking at the landfills, because those things don't exist in a vacuum. It's all sort of interrelated. We have good restaurants and we have good wine because we have clean water and we have clean soil and we have great agriculture here that supports it all. If you start attacking that clean soil and that clean water and agriculture, then that's going to be a direct hit to your other assets. So landfills are a challenge. Gas storage is a challenge. You know, anything that threatens our environmental integrity. So whenever the Finger Lakes environment is concerned, I think we need to circle the wagons. And that's both from this economic standpoint of protecting our agribusiness and tourism industry, but also, I mean, frankly, as a sportsman and an outdoorsman, I mean, this is a great place to enjoy the outdoors, and we need to protect that. So, landfills, environmental threats, I think that's a challenge. Another challenge in Geneva is poverty. Even though we do see really great gains in a lot of metrics across the board in Geneva, our poverty rate is creeping up. Mm-hmm. So how do we address that? What are the things that we could be doing to help those folks out? And like I said before, really lift all boats, look for opportunities to lift all boats. The average American household hasn't seen a real wage increase since the 1970s. We sort of had our boom years after World War II, and then it's been this 30 or 40 year period where real wages haven't gone up, they stagnated. And then on top of that, there's another whole sector of the population who are living well below even that line. So, and those are folks that are in our community, and we need to pay attention to that, I think. So that's what I would say.
How difficult is it to manage both of those? Because you're talking about two completely different issues, and two issues that honestly you almost need a completely different skill set to handle both. How do you manage both and keep an eye on both and manage to work them both in the right direction without one sort of harming the other or the other way around?
Which two things are you
talking about? When you start talking about, so you're pushing into the tourism and development, and that boat is raising, as you've been pointing out. But at the same time, how do you also make sure that poverty is being addressed directly? Because they're two very different issues, but the same people are on the County Board of Supervisors have to be thinking about all of these different aspects. So how do they manage both or all of the different issues?
Yeah, I think when you're making decisions at the supervisor's level, it's not always the most intriguing headline news stuff that you're voting on. Sometimes it's a contract about buying a snowplow, or mm-hmm. sometimes it's it can be minutia. But the bigger picture is that you need a big picture vision to guide your smaller day-to-day decision making. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the best things supervisors can do, or anyone in city government, is keep in mind always sort of what's in their gut, mm-hmm. What their ideal state for the community and for the county is, and that usually that means raising, like I said, raising all boats. There's not a silver bullet for this. Mm-hmm. I have to tell you. I mean, anyone that would sit here and tell you otherwise, I think, wouldn't be totally truthful. There's not a silver bullet, but you have to have a guiding set of values and principles and a big picture vision that you use to really help you in those smaller decisions. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a case-by-case assessment. I guess that would be my summary. Broadly speaking, I mean, it's encouraging people to be part of their community. I know that sounds corny, but the more that we can do, I mean, I don't want a tourism industry in the Finger Lakes that's passed through, dump your trash, and then walk out. I mean, I want a tourism industry, and I think we have one, where people are really invested. Some of our winery owners are some of the most, and their employees are some of the most active community members we have. I know the downtown Geneva restaurant scene, I mean, those folks are involved in all sorts of social issues. So it's about keeping your social fabric and social network tied to that mm-hmm. industry in a sense too.
Now, you mentioned gas storage, and
sure.
I can already see it. There's going to be there's someone listening out there who's saying, oh, that's happening at the other end of the lake. It just doesn't matter. Focus on the issues here in Ontario County. Focus on the issues here in Geneva.
Right.
That is an issue that impacts people in Geneva. That is an Ontario County issue, even though it's happening at the other end of the lake. Obviously, you feel that way. Otherwise, you wouldn't have mentioned it. Talk to us a little bit about that and kind of speak to that if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say that you have to think that it affects us, because to the extent that anything touches our environmental assets, and that's sort of an economics term to use, but I mean, the lake is our environmental asset, right? It attracts tourists. It gives us drinking water. It's a recreational hub. It does any number of things for Geneva and for all the surrounding communities. If that lake was, for some reason, suddenly unusable, I think we'd be in a really tough spot. I don't know, I don't know that the small businesses would be feeling the love like they do now. I don't know if the wineries would. Property values would plummet. I mean, there's a lot of people who have investments or homes on the lake, that sort of thing. I mean, if you started to see that plummet, that would not be a good thing.
Now, here's a broad question for you. What makes, nuts and bolts, a good county supervisor?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit what I was talking about before, in the sense that you have to build relationships, you have to build consensus, you have to be friends with people. You can't go in there as sort of an angry person and just think that you're going to impose your will, because you're going to end up screaming into a corner for your 4-year term. You also need to have mastery of the issues. The issues are enormously complex. I've been trying for the past 2 or 3 months to get my head around some of this stuff, and I'm still learning. And you have to do your research. You have to read before meetings. You have to understand the issues that are really on the table and understand the backstory behind the issues. You have to build relationships with the staff at the county level so that you're getting the best information that you possibly can to do the best job that you can. So I'd say that's sort of all the cocktail that would go into effective service in actually doing the job. I mean, the obvious part that we need to mention is that you need to be available to your constituents, because you need to know what they're thinking so that you can carry out their will at the county level, right? You need to be accessible. You need to be present. I don't know if we'll probably talk about it at some point, but one of my big things is that to be an effective leader, you have to show up. It's one of the simplest things in the world, but you have to do it. I mean, George Bush did it after September 11th. President Obama did it. I mean, it's a classic character trait of any leaders, that you have to be present and you have to stand with the people you were elected to support and to represent. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Now, to that end, in fact, being a good leader means getting out there and talking to people, like you said. So what have you been hearing as you've been going out actually talking to people? Yeah,
I'm glad you asked that. It's really been fun. I've been knocking on a lot of doors, and it's kind of funny, to walk up on somebody's house with their 2 barking dogs in the middle of a Saturday, and they're vacuuming, or they're about to go to the grocery store or something, and you're standing there bothering them with some political literature. But I try to make light of it, and then when it really comes down to it, people really appreciate. It seems to me that you came to the door, that you took the time to listen to them, to talk to them. I'm trying to knock on every door. That's my goal. And, there are a number of things that come right to the top. I would say that people are genuinely afraid of what's going on at the national level right now in politics. Whether it's our president or our current representative, Tom Reed, I think people are concerned with the decisions that are being made, with the way that the United States is being portrayed abroad, and on a whole variety of issues. So that's something I hear. Another thing I hear is obviously the landfill, because people sort of ask, questions about sort of what county government does, and then as soon as I mention what county government does, they immediately think of the landfill. So that's a concern I hear. Schools, people are concerned about kids. People are concerned about the next generation. So that comes up a lot. And I've got an interesting week planned out next week, where I'll actually be doing a visit at the Boys and Girls Club in Geneva to talk with their executive director, Chris Lavin, about after-school programs that the Boys and Girls Club offers. One of the one of the items on the chopping block in the most recent federal budget was the 21st Century Program and funding for the 21st Century Program. So, just seeing firsthand how valuable that after-school program is for the kids that use it at the Boys and Girls Club. And I'll be talking to them a little bit about county government and sort of a little government 101 lesson, so that'll be fun.
Now, I'm genuinely curious because you just mentioned something that I've sensed now for the last several months. There is sort of that it seems to be a trickle down where people are very worried about what's happening at the federal level. What can a city supervisor or county supervisor or even a city councilor or any hyper-local leadership, what can they do to sort of ease those concerns and sort of bring it home that, it's not quite the end of the world. We can navigate this. We can navigate that. We can make things right for you. Yeah. Is that sort of the role? Is that what the role of local government has become now?
Well, I think the role of local government is to be there, like I said, is to be there for people. It's to be present, right? And if what people care about while you're present is anxiety over what's going on in Washington or Albany or wherever else, mm-hmm. I think you should speak to that. And I think that there are things that hyper-local officials, as you call us, county supervisors, city council people, town council people can do, because they can mobilize people, they can work with people, together with people, to sort of get them up the ladder to other government representatives. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. So just sort of being a force for folks, pulling them together, and then helping them vocalize sort of over your head, up the food chain a little bit, I think is really important.
Now, what would you like to see as far as, obviously serving at the county level, you're dealing with the state a lot. What were some of the things that you would like to see more of, or like to see the state do differently, that would help make the county function a little easier, a little better, maybe with a little more money to spare at the end of the year, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm still really getting into the weeds on some of this stuff, because county, I think what your question alludes to is that county budgets and county finance and state finance are really interrelated, and it's a complex sort of tangled web. I mean, I think the state tries really hard. I think the county tries really hard. One of the things I don't want to get into is cynicism about government. I mean, it's easy enough to say that government isn't doing its job or whatever, but it's a lot harder to actually get out there and participate. Mm-hmm. I think so. Hearing from people on these issues is really valuable to me, and I would appreciate feedbacks from folks on what they think actually could be better between county and state governments.
So, last question here: why should people vote for you? This coming, we're closing in now on I think we got a month and a week before elections, right? Roughly in that range. Why should people come out? Why should they vote for you? What are you going to do different, or what are you going to offer that's unique to people living in Geneva?
Sure. Yeah, I think people should vote for me if they want somebody who's doing this for the simple fact that they care about Geneva and they care about making Geneva a better place. That's my number one goal in my heart of hearts, is that Geneva is really family to me, and I want to give Geneva the best voice that it could possibly have at the county level.
All right, well, we really appreciate you coming in today. Obviously, a lot of important issues, and you're going to be busy the next few weeks as you start to gear up for this, so really appreciate you taking the time to stop in here today.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for us today. I'd like to thank Supervisor Gard, our listeners, and FingerLakes1.com for making this podcast possible. Inside the FLX airs Sundays at 7 p.m. on Spectrum Channel 12 and is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and the FingerLakes1.com app. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.